Top of the day to everyone joining us here for 41 is the mic. That's right. I am Matt Derrick with Chiefs Digest alongside St. Patrick's Day enthusiast Nick Jacobs. Nick, you are decked out in your colors, so there is no pinching you today or this entire week.
Yeah, and I would discourage anybody from trying. Sounds like an awful idea and also assault.
I mean, I would classify you as pinchable, but I would advise against it.
Yeah, it's not a road I advise going down. That road leads to a dead end. That road's closed. So, just keep driving down the street.
There you go. Not your jam. So.
It is not. It is really not.
Well, we're trying to be festive today. Even I dressed up. I got a tie, Nick.
That's right.
And even though I realized this morning that I don't really apparently own a green dress shirt. I mean, there's green stripes in here, so
That's all that matters. That's all that matters.
I qualify. Okay? And with all deference to the fine folks at the Irish NFL podcast who gave me a pen, an Irish NFL pen, I could not find it this morning. I think it's in my bag, but I'm wearing it in spirit.
Well, Matt, that's half the battle right there.
That is that. I do feel like that's half the battle.
Yeah.
We are not technically, I guess you could say we're a week into free agency because this is day 7 since the tampering window. So we do have 7 days of free agency talk to discuss today. And we actually have Chiefs signing to talk about.
Yeah.
With Hollywood Brown, the Chiefs addressed the wide receiver room and finally dip their toe and dive into the free agent pool that's out there. It's not just their own players, and we'll get to those guys in a little bit. But Hollywood Brown, Nick, what's your level of excitement for this one?
I was really impressed at the price they were able to get him at, because I know I'd heard the going rate was going to expect to be like 15 or 16 million. That was before Calvin Ridley wrecked the market and was going to get 23 per year off his 50 million plus guarantee. So I was like, man, if Hollywood's agent wants to bump that number up per year, he probably can try. And I thought some team would pay it, but at the end of the day, the Chiefs were able to get him on that 1 year, $7 million with incentives that are up to $11 million. So to be able to get somebody that has his speed. Like, here's the thing where I need to decipher some things from the free agency podcast, and the Q&A part of it is, like I said in the Q&A portion of it, we don't know what the culture was like in Arizona, and we don't know kind of where his chemistry was at with his quarterbacks, because there was some erratic throws at times, but there was times where if I'm watching him on tape, I want to see him kind of, fight for that contested football or fight for that contested catch, or be willing to kind of go over the middle in a couple of those plays where it didn't look like full effort. Now, does that mean that's who he is as a player? No, that's just from the games I watched on tape. That is what he put on there. Like those games, those type of things I saw probably hurt him in free agency. And that's why he didn't get the 15 to, $18 million thing. And he's getting a prove it deal with Kansas City, to where he gets to go out there, kind of showcase himself in a better offense, a better culture, better scheme, and with his best quarterback he's ever played with. And I'm not just saying that because if you think about it, he's played with Lamar and Kyler Murray, and he played with Kyler Murray at Oklahoma a little bit, if I remember correctly. And this is Patrick Mahomes is on a different level than those guys. So that's where I'm not upset with the move, because they got it for a really great price. And I know what he's going to do for that offense from a speed perspective, even if he's already an upgrade over Valdez-Scantling. Like that's the first thing I think is the easiest thing to put out there. And the Chiefs are going to bring out his best ability. And look, he doesn't have a lot of drops. He had more drops at Oklahoma than I think he's had in the NFL. He really did a good job working on that part of that. So, as somebody tried to put on Twitter, they thought I was coming around to the signing and everything. I never had an issue if they were going to get him. I'm just saying I didn't think they were going to get their most bang for their buck at $15 million per year or more on a long-term contract. But them doing a 1 year prove it deal, that's perfect. That's perfect for him to have a better market next year. That's perfect for the Chiefs to get the most out of him that they're probably going to. and especially this type of year to where he has to go out and prove it to get that long-term deal, whether it's here or somewhere else down the road. I think it's a win-win for both sides and for the best of both worlds to really kind of showcase everything possible.
Yeah, like you mentioned, I mean that was a little bit of my concerns as well because the market value, like Spotrac had projected him at 14.8, and that a market value deal would have been 4 years, 59 million. That would have been just too rich for my blood at that
Mm,
price, especially because there are some red flags and not major ones, but whenever a player goes through two organizations, a first round pick goes through two organizations, you've got some concerns. And especially because, he was 1,000-yard receiver that third year in Baltimore.
mhm,
He was their best receiver, and they were winning football games, and he wanted out, wasn't happy with the offense in the style. And I mean, when you're getting the ball and you want out, that's a concern for me because, that's the thing in Kansas City. He would not be the number one option. Travis Kelce's always going to be the number one option. Rashee Rice is probably going to be the number two option in 2024. So is Hollywood Brown going to be comfortable being the number three? This contract tells me he is, because if he's taking this number, I think that does say a lot about where he is as a player, and maybe he learned a lot, maybe his experience in Arizona, because he didn't get to play with Kyler as much as he had hoped. Kyler gets the ACL that knocks him out the second half of last year and a little bit, the first half of this year, and then he had the heel injury at the end of the year, which, having a foot in the heel the last 2 years is another small red flag for me too. But you bring it back to the value that the Chiefs are getting, $7 million with the incentives. That is a very low risk deal. It's not the same quite of structure as Juju Smith-Schuster, but it is the same type of approach. So to me, yeah, I mean, this did not seem like necessarily an ideal fit at the beginning of free agency, but the way it's come together makes perfect sense. So it's a fairly low risk, high reward type of deal, and we know that's what Brett Veach loves. And even though he had the fifth-year option that kicked his age up a year, this is still what the Chiefs were looking for. They were looking for a player with a lot of speed who could take out the back of the defense that was coming off of their rookie contract. He's not a 30-year-old. He's not a duplicate of what they already have. He's not somebody who's slow. My only concern, and you kind of alluded to it, is his ability to get off and be the deep threat that he was as a rookie. But has he had the quarterback and the consistent play to do that? I mean, we're going to find out. And certainly fits into the category of find a receiver who put up some decent numbers with some bad quarterback play, because Mahomes should be able to elevate him. If he can elevate him, Hollywood Brown should be a perfect fit for this team.
Yeah, the next question will be how quickly does it take for Marquise Brown to get on the same page with Mahomes through their work in, OTAs and training camp, and where Brown likes the ball placed and Mahomes getting comfortable with placing the ball in that spot. Where does he like it thrown in the window, and Brown adjusting to the speed or the velocity that Mahomes is going to throw the football at, and how they work on that part together, just getting that familiarity down. And then in situations, do they see things the same way coverage wise? And can Brown adjust off of that? Those are the things that the quicker he's able to get check mark on all those things, the more effective he'll be in this offense, the better numbers he can put up, and the better payday he's going to get, whether it's in Kansas City or somewhere else down the road next year when we're back at this venture this time next year. So, Valdez-Scantling, I felt like just never really was on the same page with Mahomes, and then they just kind of went for it in the playoffs, and he would make some big plays in the playoffs overall. But like week in, week out, it seemed like either Mahomes, was throwing it with Valdez-Scantling at a certain speed, and Valdez-Scantling wasn't at that speed, or Mahomes threw it at the speed he thought Valdez-Scantling was going to run at, and Valdez-Scantling actually went faster and quote unquote had to come back for the ball. But the problem is, and I said this then, and I'm still going to say this now, is if you're not practicing and playing the same way, those are the things that are going to happen. Like if you're not putting in practice the same speed level on the plays that you do when game time comes around, The quarterback's never going to be able to gauge where to throw it at exactly, or where to place it for you, or to be on the same page with that part of that. And especially if you're not seeing things the same way, or you're not cutting the route the same way, adjusting off of it. Like those were all things that just seemed to kind of be, the misconnections between Mahomes and NBS while he was here, and Juju Smith-Schuster didn't seem to have that problem. Got on the same page pretty quickly with Mahomes there during training camp. And so the thing is, if Brown can do that, then the Chiefs are going to be in a really good spot quickly and early on in the season.
Yeah, and he is not. Just address it up front. He's not Tyreek Hill. He doesn't have Tyreek Hill's speed, but he might be arguably second fastest guy as a receiver in the league behind Tyreek as far as top speed goes.
Yeah.
You look at the numbers and he's there. I mean, there's a big gap between him and Tyreek, but he's number 2 as far as at least top speed hit according to the next gen stats over the last few years. So he's got that ability. And like you said, I mean, being able to practice at that speed, we'll find out pretty quickly. We'll see, the connections during OTAs. We'll hear about it. I'm assuming he will be going down to 15 passing a camp and academy down in Dallas and get some work in. But I think that, especially the way free agent market unfolded, Nick, I mean, this is probably about the best way that it could have gone for the Chiefs as far as to get somebody who really fits what they want to do without making a major commitment.
Yeah, no, it helps kind of just like the Chiefs used Donovan Smith for that 1-year gap, signing a 1-year deal and putting him in at left tackle. This is similar to what Brown does for them from a speed perspective, to where we'll talk about it a little bit later, but it gives them the necessary flexibility of what they may need to do, more so long term. And you hope he's in their long term plans and he excels in everything. But if that isn't the case, it buys them a little bit of time to be able to kind of continue to add to the wide receiver room.
Yeah, and while the Chiefs have addressed a huge need at wide receiver, there is one issue outstanding that has yet to be resolved, Nick. And I'm a tad surprised, because I thought that by the time that we were talking now on St. Patrick's Day, that L'Jarius Sneed would either no longer be a Chief or he might have a new deal in Kansas City. Was this going on to March 17th and beyond was not out of the realm of possibility. It was certainly on the board, but reality of it is that we still don't really know what's going on with L'Jarius Sneed, do we?
No, I mean, officially, no. Nobody really knows what technically is or isn't going on. I mean, most people aren't sure what number he's technically asking for. Like per year, what he wants guaranteed wise, or what type of structure he wants in the contract. Nobody seems to put those numbers out, but obviously the fact that it's not done tells me that the market doesn't necessarily agree with what the number is. So that's where you're going to have that problem in that regard. And then from a compensation perspective, I just don't think any team is going to be willing to trade until that contract and number of whatever it's going to be somebody feels comfortable with. And other teams are going to try to lowball it if that number's pretty high in the per year average and guarantee. So like the question just becomes, where's the cutoff for the Chiefs in terms of what do they need draft pick wise in return? Is it a second round pick? Is it something where they try to get sneaky and swap first with somebody? Or is it something where they try to see if they can get a 2 and 4, or can they get a 3 and 5? And then that's kind of the ballpark. Or is it just one specific pick? So I mean, like all that combined, I mean, if you are going to move on from Sneed, selfishly, you're wanting to get something at minimum in the top 100. But you really want something in that second round if you can get it done. And, the market shows that the Chiefs shouldn't be able to get more than a 3 and 5 for them with what's happened out there among pass rushers and the other corners and that were moved and everything with Carlton's deal from the Bucks to the Lions. So, yeah, I mean, I know there's a market out there for him, and I know there's teams that are interested, but it doesn't sound like the fact there's no movement tells me that the overall contract number probably isn't in the ballpark. Because if it was, I think there'd be a lot more teams and a lot more of a bidding war to get something done versus what they think his ability is at. And so, yeah, I mean, it'll. I don't know. I don't know if this is going to be resolved as quickly as anybody wants it. And then the question becomes, how much does that hinder the Chiefs from being able to get something done at offensive tackle, to add another wide receiver or anything else they want to depth wise in free agency along the D line or anywhere else? And so the longer this stretches out, the more I think it hinders them being as flexible as possible before the draft.
Yeah, and the interesting to me is that, like you mentioned, the market, you look at the 27-year-old corners in that ballpark, at least in that age group, some are a little bit older, but you look at this free agency period, and certainly nobody on the level of L'Jarius Sneed, so we'll take that as a consideration. But 7 to 12 million a year is kind of the ballpark. And while we don't know specifically what, L'Jarius Jones' asking price is, well, his franchise tag is 19.8, so that tells you right there a little bit of a disconnect. And if he's wanting as much as or more than the franchise tag, but once again, it's going to take two to tango. It's not only do the Chiefs have to get the compensation they want, L'Jarius Sneed has to work out the contract that he wants, and if both those things don't happen, I mean, either side can kind of tank the deal. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I really see the upside of a third round pick for L'Jarius Sneed when maybe if your number one goal for this season is three-peat. I mean, even eating L'Jarius Jones's contract in 19.8 might be worth it. I mean, it would not be ideal, like you said. I mean, working out an extension to free up some money this year would be the best case solution for the Chiefs. But it doesn't necessarily feel like the door is closed. I just don't know where the doors are opening up at this point. I mean, obviously there's been a lot of smoke at a particular place, and we don't know if those reports have, any true credence or merit at this point, because the key principals, at least, aren't talking. We're not hearing anything from the L'Jarius Sneed camp. We're not really hearing anything from the Andy Reid camp, and no other team out there is really sending up the smoke signals that they're interested. At least at this point, about the only thing we can go on is a Chris Lamont's tweet with googly eyes, Nick.
Yeah, man, those emojis on Twitter. I mean, we're gonna have to have a class where we take lessons on how to interpret emojis. So that yeah, that's, I don't know if Babel or Rosetta Stone or somebody's gonna have that on a little disc or app or whatever. But yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot of room for interpretation with those emojis.
Lot of room. And L'Jarius Sneed, obviously not the only player that the Chiefs are dealing with. And they actually, before they jumped into the market for Hollywood Brown, Nick, they were busy. It was just keeping their own guys.
Yeah.
The run it back campaign, the Chiefs may not be using that as a slogan. I don't think you're going to hear that out of One Arrowhead Drive, but their actions are saying that because a lot of guys are coming back. The entire defensive tackle group, everybody who took a snap last year at defensive tackle, except for Keandre Coburn, who is no longer with the Chiefs and over with Tennessee, that they lost him when they found him off the practice squad, rather, won't be back, but everybody else will. Mike Pennell signs back on. Derrick Nottie, Tershawn Wharton, Chris Jones was obviously in. We talked about defensive tackle, defensive line being an issue for this team heading into free agency and the draft. Where does this week leave you with that defensive tackle group?
For me, I mean, at your one tech spot, you're gonna have Pennell, you're gonna have Noddy, you're gonna see what Bugs can do, and you're gonna see what Farrell can do. So I mean, you're not really looking for a one tech, for the roster. So unfortunately, you're not really looking for that. Now you got Wharton and Jones over at the three tech spot, and the Chiefs are gonna have to make a decision here with the draft. Is there somebody that they want to start grooming to be the long-term three tech behind Chris Jones? And if so, this is the year to get that done. Go find that three tech that you really like that can move into Chris's role long-term. Let him learn from Chris over the next 2 to 3 years. Then you have that role that is very crucial with this defensive scheme. You have that role filled. And as long as you want to keep that defensive scheme down the road, like then you have that 3-tech spot filled, which is very hard to find to begin with. So this is one of those times where you can get a little bit ahead of what is coming down the road. And so that's the decision you got to make. For me personally, I'd be trying to find a 3-tech in the first 3 rounds that can kind of be that heir apparent and at minimum be able to give slight drop off. But the other thing I do want to say in terms of the Chris Jones deal, I did find it funny that Aaron Donald waited to announce his retirement until after Chris Jones got his deal. Because think about this part of it, and I don't know if anybody else brought this up. If Aaron Donald retires before free agency starts, nobody can use Aaron Donald's contract anymore as kind of the hey, I want more than Aaron Donald. So then Chris Jones wouldn't have had, and his agency may have not had the same level of leverage because now Chris has just kind of taken over that, that number that Aaron Donald had. So now everybody's going to be trying to shoot for Chris Jones's number. But say Aaron Donald magically had retired, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, or whatever, then nobody, people could use that number, but it wasn't active in the NFL at that point. So I just found that some interesting, I personally think gamesmanship for Donald to make sure that he didn't announce his retirement. And even though he clearly knew he was going to do it until after free agency began and all the defensive tackles had a chance to be able to use his number to get themselves max dollar. That's all I'm saying. I'm saying I don't think that's a coincidence that his retirement was after Chris Jones and some of the other defensive tackles, Christian Wilkins magically got paid.
And considering that Chris's numbers for the first 3 years and for the average all comes out to pretty much Aaron Donald money. I mean, it's not identical. It was a little bit tweaked of a contract to accommodate for the fact that Chiefs needed to free up some calorie space down the road, and Chris, at least it seems like he expects to play longer than maybe Aaron Donald did. We'll see, but there's a lot of similarities between those two deals. Much so for you to just say, "Oh, that's a coincidence." No, I mean, Chris Jones eventually got the Aaron Donald deal that he wanted.
Yeah, and Aaron Donald made sure he didn't retire until he got it.
Very nice gesture from Aaron Donald to help some guys out.
I don't think I'm wrong about that either.
I don't think you're wrong either. Absolutely. I mean, some things are a coincidence, but some things aren't. And that just brings a little bit of not being a coincidence.
Yeah.
Wasn't the only free agent the Chiefs retained. They've retained a few others as well. James Winchester was the first. We talked about that a little bit last week because he at least got agreed to terms before even Monday started. So got that done a little bit. Anything else stand out to you about Nick about the importance of just the Chiefs bringing back this group? I think by my count, they started out with 20 free agents between unrestricted Jody Fortson, who became an unrestricted free agent and went to Miami. I think the Chiefs have now kept 7 of their own free agents. That's actually a higher number than I expected them to have at this point.
I mean, once Irv Smith Jr. got signed by the Chiefs and brought that athletic ability there, he doesn't have the same size that Jody Fortson does, but he's very similar, if not a little bit higher up on terms of athletic ability than what Fortson had. So he's going to fit into that potential. He's going to fit in that spot potentially. And like we talked about with him on the press conference, I mean, the thing about Smith is he was at Alabama. He was there where their expectations were always high, where they're always competing for championships and playing in some of the biggest games, biggest moments. And they're the litmus test for a lot of other colleges. So he's been there, done that before. He's used to that type of mentality, that type of mindset, that type of preparation week in and week out. And now he's coming to a team in Kansas City where that's going to be the norm. So I'm just saying a guy who's been there through that before. That's why I asked him the question I did, because there's not a lot of players that can just come in as a free agent or, as a draft pick and understand what that's like and just what that can do, how much mental toughness you have to have and just what type of approach you have to take to be able to kind of perform at that level and maintain that level when you're going up against, teams that consider you kind of the test of where they're at as a franchise or where they're at as a culture. And so, like, that getting him, I think is I'm hoping it's going to be an underrated move. Athletically, he's very intriguing as a blocker with the way he can get out into space on pulls, the way he can reach, and just what he can do. Obviously, within splitting out wide or being the second tight end. So I mean, there's a lot of promise there, and I know fans from the Bengals and Vikings wanted to make sure to get in my mentions and tell me how they had the same expectations and everything. And I just wanted to say to them, yeah, but did you have a competent coaching staff? So there's that. And then on top of that, it's also, like for me, like Andy Reid's going to find something that everybody's capable of, and he's going to lean on that for them, and he's going to push them to those levels. So it's just like, I don't know. I don't really, I'm a person that like people can tell me like, oh, well, when they're at this franchise, he thought this, and this franchise, I thought that. Yeah, I don't care. Chiefs coaching staff saw something that they like athletically, and they're going to do everything they can to bring out the best in him. So, like, that's, you're looking at, when you're looking at players, you're looking at traits that they have, athletic ability that they have, and how does it fit in specific schemes. And some of the stuff he did may have not fit in other schemes. So, is what it is on that.
Is what it is. Um, where does that leave the Chiefs now with the moves that they have made going forward? There's really two aspects. One's going to be the future waves of free agency. There's still more work to be done. I mean, it feels kind of like the second wave of free agency is probably coming to a close. I think the next couple of days we're going to really see the third wave kind of kick in, and teams are now starting to look through and saying, okay, who has slipped through the cracks? Who's some players that really stand out? Now that we've kind of got completed the first week, Nick, what are the big areas of focus for you for the Chiefs going forward in free agency, with also being cognizant of the draft down the road, and what their draft needs might be now and how they've changed since the beginning of free agency?
Yeah, I think if there's an offensive tackle out there that they would like to come in and compete at left tackle, or even right tackle potentially, I'm all for that. Is there somebody that they want to get at center or guard that can kind of be a part of the puzzle this year as a backup, but if they need them to start next year, they feel like they can develop them to become one of those starters on the interior? Because when you're looking at next year with Creed's contract up, with Trey Smith's contract up, and then Joe Tooney, you're gonna have to make a decision on after this year, because you're potentially gonna need his money to pay Creed and Trey. Like, something's gonna give on that interior next year financially. It's just a matter of which road the Chiefs elect to go down in that regard. So then the other part of it is there something, like, say, because they can get out from Juwan Taylor's contract after this year. So is Wanya Morris potentially the long-term guy you're going to put at right tackle, or because he's going to need snaps, whether it's at left or right, he's going to need snaps this year to be able for you to feel comfortable with that either way. And then, like, is there another tackle you don't have yet that maybe can help become cost control to where maybe you're going to be more expensive on the interior next year, but you're going to be cheaper at the tackle position? So, like, that's something that I know they're probably having to wrestle with. Wide receiver wise, yes, you got Brown for the short term, but like outside of Brown and Rashee Rice and Justin Watson, you really don't know what you do know who you have on the roster. You just don't know if you have enough to really kind of push it past what it was last year. So I would still love to see them, as I said in previous podcasts, I'd love to see them go out and get another veteran receiver, whether that's going to be Mike Williams on a prove-it deal like Juju Smith-Schuster, whether that's a Hunter Renfrow, whether that's a KJ Osborne, who I think could be intriguing here. Like, there's still wide receivers out there that I think can help the Chiefs as another option, whether it's a big body receiver or if it's just a guy who can work in the slot or work over the middle to help out. Running back, they didn't the market was too expensive for what they could have gotten, and
For
I've
sure.
talked about it on here before. J.K. Dobbins on a prove it deal. You don't definitively know if he will or won't be, what he was before coming off the Achilles, but like on a 1 year prove it deal, like that's not a bad investment to give yourself a possibility for both the end of this year and into next year, hopefully. You're still going to need to add at that position in the draft or with another free agent as well, in my book. But like that's another aspect of it. But I mean, yeah, in terms of offense, you're either looking at interior depth, offensive tackle, an additional wide receiver, and Jalen Guyton, I think, is still out there from the Chargers. It's another guy I'd be interested in. So like, I mean, there's still receiving options that I think are within the that are going to be less than what Marquise Brown is, which is what I was kind of after all along when you and I were talking in the previous weeks. Like, I was hoping to get two receivers that were going to be under 10 million a pop each. So like if you can accomplish that with somebody at 7 and another person at 5 or 4 or whatever, like that, I think that's very successful, and that's almost the equivalent of what Valdez Scantling was getting paid. So you're getting two better receivers at the price of one. So that's part of that aspect of it. Defensively, you're still going to need to add on defensive end if you can. Whether and that could be bringing back Mike Dana, but you also need to find somebody else, whether it's in draft or free agency, to potentially rotate in, because you can't just bank on BJ Thompson being that fourth guy right now, and you don't know when a mini who will or won't be back. And if there's anything you want to get depth wise at linebacker, you can. But I think like secondary is the one spot they may get somebody for a 1 year deal, potentially, but for the most part, secondary is like that's the spot, and obviously the specialist, and those are the spots that you really don't necessarily need to add anything. But I think for the most part, and I'll say this, even in the draft part of it, even though the Chiefs got Marquise Brown, I personally wouldn't rule out somebody speed wise like Jackson from Tulane or Worthy from Texas, like, because that you would be allowing them time to be behind Brown and groom to where maybe they show you enough that you don't pay Brown down the road if it comes to that. Or if you want to get a big bodied receiver, like I think receivers should be on the table in this draft because of how stacked I think this wide receiver draft class is going to be. If you get two guys out of this with your picks, I'm not going to be upset about that. Like, I'm going to be like, all right, that wide receiver spot's in a good position to where you're not having to go out and pay, worry about trying to pay 20 million each year for the spot. And obviously offensive tackle, like those are kind of my two highest priorities. And I hope to see the Chiefs draft a running back. And then along that defensive line, I'm hoping to see him draft defensive line as well. So, I mean, like those are kind of my key positions that I don't really, even if you do stuff in free agency, I still want to see you add to that spot to where you can kind of keep cost at a certain level, especially with how much you're paying Chris Jones. You really want to keep defensive line at a certain cost control right now.
Well, and the one thing that Brett Veach has absolutely done through free agency is one thing he definitely likes to do every year, which is to build a unit that's ready to go out and play right now. He wants to be able to have a team on the field that, and frankly, considering their goal is to win a Super Bowl, he wants to be able to put a team right now on the field that can compete for a Super Bowl. And I think he feels like that, which allows the Chiefs to go into the draft with complete freedom to draft a player that's the best available at that position. They don't have to be married to a spot. They don't have to use 32 on the 8th best defensive end because 7 have gone already and you got to get one before they're going out of style. No, I mean, if there's value somewhere else, he can go somewhere else with that pick. I mean, and get more production and get more value than just sticking where he is. So we'll see what happens. I still think that the Chiefs drafting at 32 is remote. I mean, not terrible, but I still think there's other positions where they could draft it with much more plurality. So we'll see what they do. But that's the one thing that stands out to me, at least as far as the moves that they've made. The only area where you could really say that maybe they're not ready to go out and play a game, ironically, might be quarterback, just because you don't have that veteran on the bench right now You've just got Patrick Mahomes and Chris Oladokun. I think the Chiefs would rather have another backup quarterback, so we'll see if it's going to be Blaine Gabbert or door number 2. But I would imagine that's another domino that could fall before the draft if they want a veteran. And there's some interesting choices out there, just like there are every year. Safeties even got some interesting prices and possibilities out there if they need to go that route. And when it comes to corner, I mean, I generally, my philosophy is trust in Dave Merritt. I mean, you give him a lump of clay, he is going to turn it into a diamond. So you get the right player, Dave Merritt's going to make it work.
Right.
So,
And yeah, that's why you really don't have to invest as high if you don't feel comfortable. But when you do, he's going to definitely bring out the best in them. So yeah, no, that's one of the luxuries the Chiefs have. And I mean, yeah, it's just a question of how much cap room do they have, and how much cap room do they need to get everything else done that they want to. Because I mean, Mike Dana's still out there, and I would love to see him back in Kansas City for the Chiefs. I think he'd be good rotationally, and I think the market's set to where most people that are on the market now at this point, you're probably not getting more than 5 million a year at this stage of the game. It's 5 million or less at this point. So it'll be interesting.
indeed, it will. A lot going on. There will probably be more action this week from the Chiefs. We'll see what happens. Draft is just a little over a month away, Nick. I mean, I know that you're going to be in the bunker watching film here pretty soon.
Already doing it. So yeah, no, if you want to sneak peek next week, we're probably going to start on draft prospects at wide receiver. So that'll probably be next week's podcast.
I imagine that is one that a lot of folks are going to want to hear, Nick.
I hope so. I hope so. Otherwise, this work is for nothing.
Well, that is kind of a wrap up of where the Chiefs are after 1 week of free agency, what they've got and accomplished this week, what's left to do, where they might be going in the draft now that they do have all this addressed. We will have another Q&A on Tuesday night. And of course, you can always come back here and catch 41 is the mic with myself and Nick every Sunday. We'll be back next week with all the latest news and the breakdowns and analysis and tell you what's happening at One Arrowhead Drive. If there's any other last messages for you, Nick, I'm just going to turn over to you.
Oh, yeah, no, I was going to say, for people that are wondering about the shirt, since it's St. Patrick's Day, I decided to go get this. It's like a little baby Carlos from The Hangover, but it's a leprechaun. So, I just felt like that was the most fitting T-shirt for St. Patrick's Day.
Very, very on brand, Nick.
I don't have a name for him, so if people want to put it in the comment section or put it on the Q&A on Tuesday, give me a name for him. That's what we'll name the T-shirt, and I'll wear it at random times, even on non-St. Patrick's days.
Hashtag name Nick's leprechaun baby.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess we'll close it out with the trademark. Until next time, bid you adieu.